Our call to worship today words are by Carl Seberg. Let there be joy in our coming together this morning. Let there be truth heard in the words we speak and the songs we sing. Let there be help and healing for the disharmony and despair. Let there be silence for the voice within us and beyond us. Let there be joy in our coming together.
Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Midland's multi-platform worship service. I am Susan Meyer. I'm a member of the worship and social justice teams, and I'm the worship associate today. A happy Hanukkah to anyone among us who is of Jewish descent. For those of you online, please type into the chat box who you are and who you have brought with you today. We will be recording this service, but personal sharing will be edited out. For those of you in person, please turn off the Wi-Fi connection and ringer on your phones. Unless you have downloaded the order of service to them, you won't be needing them for the next hour. Unitarian Universalism is a welcoming and inclusive religion. It encourages us to use open hearts and minds because our own experience, conscience, and reason are the final authorities in religion. It affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person and that we are all connected to each other and the earth. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take this off. Getting out of breath. A special welcome to any visitors today. We appreciate you spending some of your Sunday morning with us. If you have any questions, please let us know in person, in the chat box, or by phone, or through our Facebook page. If you're considering becoming a member of the fellowship, please contact our minister, Reverend Eric Severson, our office administrator, Wendy Altmeyer, or let us know of your interest in person, in the chat box, or on the visitor sign-in sheet. If you have a chalice or candle at home and would like to join in our chalice lighting remotely, now would be a good time to get that ready. We will include joys and sorrows this morning, which we have asked you to submit in advance. If you are on Zoom and did not have a chance to, please enter your joy or sorrow in the chat box at this time. There are a few late-breaking announcements today. Midland Area Interfaith Friends will have a Zoom today at 4 p.m. Contact Reverend Eric for details. Reverend Eric has provided some reflections for us to consider this month in the Candle Flame newsletter. The UUFOM Choir will be performing this Friday at Dow's Garden at 6:45 p.m. Please bundle up and arrive early. The RE team is looking for volunteers to assist with Sunday classes and the nursery. Sign up with the link in the newsletter or on Facebook. The fellowship office will be closed and staff will be off for the holidays at various times this month. You will find details for all of these and much more in our Candle Flame newsletter, the UUFOM News Facebook group, or uufom.org.
Thank you, Susan. And our chalice lighting words today are by the Reverend Gordon McKeeman. Deep calls unto deep. Joy calls unto joy. Light calls unto light. Let the kindling of this flame rekindle in us the inner flame of love, of peace, of hope. And as one flame lights another, nor grows the less, we pledge ourselves to be bearers of the light wherever we are. Thank you. Our holiday pageant this year is recorded for our viewing pleasure. The Solar Express written by Jeanette Royal and inspired by Chris Van Allsburg's The Polar Express, features several of our own youngsters. The pageant was directed and edited by Chris Sant. So let's partake of our pageant.
Our story begins on the night of winter solstice with two children sitting in front of a window, looking out on the dark night. The sun had gone down quite early in the afternoon, and they weren't able to play in the snow for as long as they would have liked. They were tired of it getting dark so early.
After it was summer again, we could play into the night. Remember that time we stayed up till the moon one night? That was my favorite day of the year. I don't like the dark.
Me too. Sometimes I'm afraid of the dark, and it seems we have to go to bed earlier and earlier. I wonder if the sun ever goes away.
Right about then, their mom walked in and Bubble heard their conversation.
You know, a long time ago, people used to be afraid of this time of year. They were scared the sun would return. So they celebrated this day, the winter solstice. The winter solstice is the shortest day and longest night of the year. After tonight, the days will start getting longer and the sun will start shining bright. It will still be cold since winter just started, but it won't be dark for so long. Now it's time for bed for you.
The children were soon asleep in their bed. Just before midnight, they awoke to a train whistle. They looked out the window and saw a golden train settling in front of their house. They ran outside to see what was going on.
All aboard!
Where are you going?
To the equator, of course. This is the Solar Express, the only train allowed, powered completely by summer. So we need to get a move on back to the sun to be with you. Are you coming?
Children looked at each other with sweet smiles on their faces and jumped aboard. They were surprised by how many children were on board.
Why are there so many children? Every one of them was experiencing the darkness of winter and hot sent out a message from our sun. The Solar Express is charged each year to bring children to the equator who have hopes for more light. The equator is a place on planet Earth where the sun always shines equally every day and is almost always warm.
That sounds amazing.
Are we really going there? We are sure. So take your seats and get ready for the ride. In fact, we are just about ready to serve a burst of sunshine for us now.
The train was filled with children from all over the world. They talked about how they celebrated light.
And the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah, a menorah is lit to remember the story of the Maccabees and the miraculous oil that lasted for 8 days.
The Winter Solstice Festival of Dongji is celebrated in China. Families gather to celebrate the balance of dark and light by making and eating tingguan, a special brightly colored rice that symbolizes reunion. Diwali is the festival of light from India. Many celebrate by lighting oil lamps to signify the battle of good over evil within an individual.
The winter solstice is celebrated by lighting the Yule log on the fire and watching it burn through the night until the sun returns. The log was lit to conquer darkness, banish evil spirits, and bring luck for the coming year.
Families celebrate African American culture during Kwanzaa by lighting 7 candles over 7 days. Each day symbolizes a value focused on building community. The colors of the candles are black, red, and green. Black for the people, red for their struggle, and green for the future and hope that comes from their struggle.
In Sweden, St. Lucia is celebrated for kindness and love. One child in the family wears a crown of camels and serves coffee, bread, and biscuits after the sunrise.
Families celebrate the Unitarian Universalist holiday of Chalaka, starting the first Monday of December for 7 days. Each day they light their chalice and celebrate a principle.
Of light. As the trains fell out, all of a sudden the lights on the train went out, and all was dark except for a ball of light the conductor held. The conductor moved about the train, giving each child a golden cup filled with light, which each looked a little different from the next.
This is your light. It will shine most brightly when there is darkness. It will bring you hope and peace, which you can share with others.
The children each held on to their cups tightly, realizing they had something very special indeed. Then the train turned upward and stopped like a plane through a blanket of clouds. As it leveled out, the train was filled with brilliant lights streaming in through the windows.
We're now over the equator. Look out the windows to see the land and oceans below sparkle in the sunlight. Feel the warmth of the rays of light and soak it into your soul. Take a good long look. In a few minutes, the train will be charged once again for your journey home.
All the children opened their windows and let the light shine in. They felt the warmness and light wrap around them as they laughed and cheered. Everyone on board felt a strong sense of hope, peace, and love surrounding them. Next morning, the brother and sister woke up thinking they had dreamed the train. But then they remembered their gold cups of light and turned to their bedside table to find them glowing. They ran to show their mom the beautiful light they had been given. The mom looked into the cups, her cracks, because she did not see any light. She looked up to tell her children and saw in their eyes a sparkle of light. She then realized the sparkle was a light of hope, peace, and love everlasting, shining forth as clear as the sunlight.
As a pastoral response today, I share these words from the Reverend Joe Cherry. Joy, I can do this. Joy is hard. Joy requires us to feel safe enough, to be safe enough, to open to vulnerability. To feel joy, you must be brave. Joy walks into a room after the space has been cleared of shame, cleared of doubt, cleared of self-recrimination. Joy is hard. Joy is hard. And joy is worth the work of preparation. Preparing oneself and setting down all the defenses, all the shoulds and could-haves, all the should not haves and might haves. Joy is worth the work. You are worth the work. You can start small. The simple pleasure of your favorite tea, the grand freedom of a full belly laugh. Invite joy to be your companion.
Our reading today are excerpts from A Craftsman's Legacy by Eric Georges with John Sternfeld. Craft is the execution of an artistic vision. Craft without art will be dull and uninspired. Art without craft will be a mess. Whether we are conscious of it or not, we are always surrounded by the past. Our world is comprised of objects that came from the time, innovation, and hard work of people who were here before us. The chair and desk you are sitting at, the light bulb shining on that desk, the coffee in that cup, the cup itself. History is a living and breathing and right in front of our eyes. We just have to choose to see it. To be a craftsman is to be a time capsuler, a creator of permanence. The object and the skills behind it are a form of immortality. Legacy is at the crux of what craftsmen do and who we are. We learn and receive. We internalize and utilize. We teach and we pass on. Some craftsmen understand this intuitively. There is an optimism about the work, a belief that what we're doing will outlast us. The handmade object, created with care and detail, embodying a history and a tradition, is enormously powerful. Crafts and the craftsmanship can move us, help us feel alive, and restore our sense of humanity. Craftsmen live and work at the mercy of these contradicting ideas, serving the past and future, possessing confidence and humility, honoring the simple and the complex, having control, and submitting to the mystery. It's the raw heaviness of the work, like wailing on metal with hammers and stoking coal into a fire. It's churning machines and noise and sparks, but it's also inches and details. It's dexterity and delicacy. It's persistence, working your tail off on something day and night, and then just letting it be. To actually get into the shop and build something, I have to shut everything else out. I have to get lost in there. Excellence requires staying in the present moment, concentrating on what's in front of me right now, condensing and contracting the world down to a size where I can control it. It requires focus. When we tap into that kind of singular focus, that's when we open ourselves up to moments of inspiration. These don't actually come out of nowhere. They come from years and years of working on your craft. One day the feeling gets lit, but it needs a pile of dry wood to become the raging fire. Athletes often call reaching this headspace being in the zone. Scientists call it a flow state, and some people claim it's actually a true source of happiness. Making things with our hands centers us. The simple act of doing, of getting lost in it, of shutting everything out until we look up again and realize time has passed, is as close as some of us get to that feeling of inner peace. Knowing what we're here for and what we must protect is another way that we can find peace. Peace is when we find a place, if only briefly, where that tension between us and the world fades. Or maybe it's more accurate to say that the tension doesn't bother us. Making things is putting ourselves out there in a naked and vulnerable way. I think it's fear. Fear of exposing ourselves, fear of not being good at something, fear of revealing our imperfections. But the imperfections are where the value is. They speak to our humanness. I fail all the time. I use it as a tool for growth, for learning, for excellence. If I think back on my life and my work, I've never really gotten anywhere by staying in my comfort zone. Failure is the thing that has continually pushed me forward and outward. We are all beginners, amateurs, professionals, and teachers at something. Even if you've only been at it a short while, you have something to share, like a fresh set of eyes, which is enormously valuable. Even if you've been doing it your whole life, you still have something to learn from that new perspective. When you make things with your hands, you become part of a community. There is a kinship and a set of shared values. No matter how different the work, we are all connected. There is a Greek word, marachi, that I love. We don't really have an equivalent word in English. It means putting yourself into something, your passion, your ingenuity, the you in you. That kind of individuality is worth informing everything we do. Now we will have an interlude, Spinning Song by Albert Elmenreich, played by Sarah Nussworn.
Thank you to Susan for doing our reading today. Thank you to Sarah for bringing us joy. Here's a headline from 3 days ago on the website businessinsider.com. Over 90% of job switchers say they quit because the pandemic made them feel like life is too short to stay in a job they weren't passionate about. Maybe you know someone for whom this applies. The article went on to say that in the last couple of years, many workers retired early over fears of COVID, the coronavirus, lost their jobs early in the pandemic, or left the labor force for different reasons, like childcare issues or fears of getting sick. For 6 months in a row, workers around the world quit their jobs at record rates. The shift has been called the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, and even the Great Realization. Organizational psychologist Anthony Klotz suggests that this change is not at all surprising. Quote, when human beings come into contact with death and illness in their lives, it causes them to take a step back and ask existential questions. Like, what gives me purpose and happiness in life? And does that match up with how I'm spending my life right now? So in many cases, those reflections will lead to life pivots. And so it's interesting that we find ourselves today discussing this book, A Craftsman's Legacy, Why Working with Our Hands Gives Us Meaning. Eric Gorgas is the owner of Voodoo Choppers, just outside Detroit, and host of the American Public Television series, A Craftsman's Legacy. How many of you have happened to see it? A couple of us. Or read the book? Probably not, but I'd like to go back and check out the TV series myself. The book, co-written with John Sternfeld, was published in 2019, about a year before the pandemic. Finding or achieving fulfillment or joy is not always easy. In fact, as Reverend Cherry described, it can be downright hard. Joy can require us to be open and receptive, brave enough to be vulnerable. It can require us to clear away the shame, doubt, and self-recrimination we may be feeling. All the shoulds, coulds, and might-haves. Joy can be hard to find sometimes, but it is so worth the work. And what is this kind of internal work but psychological or spiritual growth? Asking existential questions, learning to focus, to seek mindfulness or inner peace, to open to inspiration, to invest oneself in work that is fulfilling, to become part of a community. All of these are touched on in Gorgas's book. Unitarian Universalism's third guiding principle encourages acceptance of one another and encouragement of spiritual growth in our congregations. Part of what we are about as a fellowship is supporting one another in this growth. Despite what might be perceived as a very pedestrian subject, like working with one's hands, a craftsman's legacy came down to, in large part, a deeply philosophical description of the spiritual growth, fulfillment, and joy that Gorgas and other makers find in their crafts. And I'm sure you have felt these too. I would wager that you too have found joy, growth, and fulfillment in at least one of these creative pursuits: parenting, gardening, woodworking, music making, knitting, crocheting, baking or cooking, home remodeling, auto repair, or some other practice. Gorgas said this about craftsmen: we learn and receive, we internalize and utilize, and we teach and pass on. Through creative endeavors, he says, craftsmen live and work at the mercy of contrasting ideas, serving the past and the future, possessing confidence and humility, honoring the simple and the complex, having control and submitting to the mystery. What is all this but spiritual work and hopefully growth? Unitarian Universalism, too, claims as its first source of wisdom the direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, affirmed in all cultures, that moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces that create and uphold life. I would say that Unitarian Universalism greatly values the creative process and all the transformational benefits that go along with it. Now, the craftsman's legacy does hold a strongly masculine bias. I will give you fair warning for that. At a ratio of about 4-to-1, it calls overwhelmingly on male-identified sources of authority. The book seems written to appeal to a male audience, and I suppose it might reflect a male domination of the many crafts that Gorgias highlights: blacksmithing, glass blowing, clock making, furniture making, wood turning, stone carving, leather working, yarn spinning, flute making, pottery, and more. Its inherent bias, though, does not negate the truths that he names. I still appreciate, for example, his insight that we are surrounded by the past, by objects that came from the time, innovation, and hard work of people who were here before us. And that in a way, the objects and skills left behind are, if not a means of immortality, at least a sort of legacy. The handmade object, he said, created with care and detail, embodying a history and a tradition, is enormously powerful. Crafts and craftsmanship can move us, help us feel alive, and restore our sense of humanity. I've arranged here some examples for those of you at home on the altar, some examples of handmade objects that live in the Severson household. And I'll bet yours has many as well. Gorgias goes into detail about the crafting process, which I suspect would resonate with many of us. He describes, for example, the need to focus. And when we focus, opening ourselves to inspiration, being in the zone or the flow state of mind. Making things centers us, he wrote. Getting lost in a project, shutting everything out until we look up again and realize time has passed. This is as close as some of us will ever get to feeling a feeling of inner peace, he says. Author Annie Dillard once wrote that we are here to witness the creation and abet it. She went on to say that according to the second law of thermodynamics, things fall apart, structures disintegrate. Buckminster Fuller, a Unitarian, hinted that at a reason why we are here. By creating things, thinking up new combinations, we counteract this flow of entropy. We make new structures, new wholeness, so the universe comes out even. So says Annie Dillard. When was the last time you stopped to ask yourself existential questions? Yesterday? This morning? A year ago? Who am I? Why am I here? Why do I do what I do? How often do we ask ourselves about what people, things, values, or principles we believe we must protect, and why? Answering these questions about our purpose, wrote Gorgias, is another way of finding inner peace. I know that at least a few of you are itching to have these conversations. So I invite you after today, later today and in coming weeks or months, to give some thought to what you've spent your life protecting and what you feel needs protecting now and in the future. Maybe we'll have a chance to chat about that sometime. One of the challenges of the creative process, as Gorgias wrote, is putting ourselves out there in a naked and vulnerable way, having the courage to be vulnerable and to reveal our imperfections. The Western white supremacist concept of perfection is, if not an illusion, as Gorgias suggested, at least a highly subjective and unreasonable aspiration. For you word geeks, the Latin and Old French roots of the word perfect mean to make complete. The concept of perfect as flawless didn't enter Western language until Old English in the 15th century. It was Catholic philosopher and author G.K. Chesterton who once wrote that anything worth doing is worth doing badly. He meant, of course, for us to recognize our imperfect humanity, that we make mistakes, particularly when we begin something outside our experience. So let's give ourselves and one another a break, some grace. When we begin something outside our experience. Hell, simply coping with a pandemic, which none of us has experienced in our lifetime, let alone trying to aid and abet in creating a loving and just and peaceful world, requires enormous creativity and patience. We are making mistakes. We will make mistakes. We're all beginners, amateurs, professionals, and teachers at something, wrote Gorgias. Even if you've only been at it a short time, you have something to share, like a fresh set of eyes, which is enormously valuable. And even if you've been doing it your whole adult life, you still have something to learn from that new perspective. We are human. We make mistakes. We make poor choices, sometimes tragically. We fail. But contrary to the many ways we were taught, or to the ways many of us were taught, failure is not something about which to be embarrassed or ashamed. Gorgias makes the point that we can use failure as a tool to learn and grow and move toward excellence. What was Irish author and playwright Samuel Beckett's mantra? Try again, fail better. A craftsman's legacy is both very accessible and deeply rich. Through the creative process, Gorgias wrote, we become part of a community. There's a kinship and a set of shared values. No matter how different the work, we're all connected, he wrote. These aspects sound very much like those of a faith community. In a community such as ours, as one flame lights another, deep calls unto deep, and joy calls unto joy. Let us be grateful for that. Like the joy of our parents and youngsters in creating and viewing today's pageant. Let us give thanks for this snappy new day, for this time we share, for all those gathered here and those far away. Let us cherish our imperfect humanity and the differences that make each of us unique. Let us re-examine what gives purpose and meaning and happiness to our lives. Let us support one another in our spiritual growth, and let our spirits be renewed. In our acts of creating, let us counteract the flow of entropy. Let us embody the Greek word meraki, putting ourselves, our passion, our ingenuity into everything we do. Life is too short to do otherwise. Blessed be and amen.
Susan, you're muted.
Will be greatly received. Our offertory today is Where Sheep May Safely Graze by J.S. Bach, played by Sarah Nussworn.
Thank you again, Sarah. As a chalice lighting today, we have the words of the Reverend Leslie Takahashi. All that we have ever loved, all that we have ever been, stands with us on the brink of all that we aspire to create. A deeper peace, a larger love, a more embracing hope, a deeper joy in this life we share. Thank you to all who made this service possible today. Thank you for joining us. We now invite our Zoom guests to join in breakout rooms and our in-person guests to gather for further conversation outside. Again, as you exit, please drop items in the plates. Whatever you may encounter in the coming week, please know that the love of this community goes with you. Until we're together again, many blessings.